Howdy folks, welcome back to another marvelous anime video. Villains can often make or break a series as they lay the groundwork upon which the protagonist's deeds will be deemed to have been sufficiently heroic or not. If the villain isn't well written, it significantly reduces the stakes of the plot and dilutes the narrative considerably. Therefore, it's not really a stretch to say that creating a memorable villain is as important as making a protagonist that the audience can rally behind. We find a villain that fits this bill perfectly in the first season of the anime called Psycho-Pass. Shogo Makishima is one of the most cold-blooded and cruel villains ever created, but his character is much more than just a mass murderer. He's articulate, well-versed in philosophy, charismatic, and has a perfectly valid reason to justify his heinous actions. However, it's not so much his charm or reasoning that makes him evil, it's his subversion of these ideals and the hypocrisy he displays by showing a callous disregard for human life while claiming that he's trying to save humanity that makes him so complex. Thanks to Makishima, the overall quality and stakes of Psycho-Pass are greatly raised, leading to the series becoming one of the best anime to have ever come out. There's a lot of similarities between him and Griffith from Berserk, who's another legendary villain that we're big fans of here at Marvelous Anime. We hope to explore Makishima's character thoroughly by juxtaposing it with Griffith, as there are a lot of thematic similarities between these two iconic villains. From their somewhat similar origins, philosophies, and places in their respective worlds, we will leave no stone unturned in this pursuit. While Griffith is an extremely well-documented character, we feel that Makishima deserves his time in the sun as well. Makishima is an enigma that emerges as an anomaly that cannot be measured or quantified by society and the system that governs it. We hope that by the end of this video, you not only have a much deeper understanding of Makishima's character, but also Psycho-Pass as a series. So, without wasting any more time, let's dive right into the neon-lit, crime-filled streets of Psycho-Pass as we try to dissect the character of one of its most dangerous denizens. Let's begin. Origins shrouded in mystery. The early days of Shogo Makishima are steeped in mystery, and there's very little told to us explicitly. However, judging from his behavior and persona, we can figure out quite a bit about his past. Let's get the most obvious thing out of the way. Shogo Makishima was born with a Psycho-Pass that flies under the radar of the Sibyl system. This means that no matter what heinous acts he commits or thoughts he harbors, Makishima is invisible to the law. It's likely that he discovered this early in his childhood, and considering his disillusionment with the system, one of two things likely happened. He either saw seemingly innocent citizens, possibly his loved ones, being destroyed by the system without having committed any crimes on the mere basis of their Psycho-Pass. This probably made him feel isolated, as he was a ghost to the system. The other thing could be that after he learned early on that he was basically immune to the Sibyl system, he exploited this greatly to his advantage. At the same time, he saw people far more innocent than himself being incarcerated or killed due to the same system that chose to ignore his heinous activities. This probably led to him developing a god complex that he used to fulfill his sadistic urges, convincing himself that all his actions were for the greater good. In this manner, he slowly developed the personality that the audience is familiar with over the years. There's another fact that we can infer from the way that he quotes famous philosophers and authors like George Orwell, Shakespeare, and Dostoevsky. The fact that he is so well versed in these classical works probably indicates some sort of elite education. Add to this the fact that his mannerisms and the way he speaks are highly polished, which further bolsters our belief that Makishima probably belonged to a rich family and was raised or lived in intellectual circles. He likely grew up aware of his outsider status, knowing that the system couldn't measure or understand him. This could have created a profound sense of detachment from society, leading to the belief that human authenticity lies outside of conformity and control. Part of the reason why his origin is mystery is that Makishima's identity is a construct. It's seemingly there only to serve a purpose, as he actually views himself as a symbol of free will in a deterministic society. This adds another layer of depth to a character who would otherwise simply be just another antisocial psychopath. In a similar manner, Griffith's origins are also left intentionally vague, which adds to his overall mystique. This mystique makes it easier for people to project their own ideals on him, making him easier to follow. It allows him to embody whatever the others need: a savior, a leader, even a prophet, allowing him to manipulate them to further his own designs, much like Makishima. Although we know nothing of his biological parents, we're told that he played alongside his fellow street urchins under the looming shadows of the brothels and taverns that lined the streets. Even at that tender age, he was sure that he was destined for something much more, setting him apart from other kids his age. Thus, while his origins might be fragmented and largely unknown, it serves a greater purpose with regards to the narrative and the story in a similar manner to Makishima's. Character Design Analysis. Since we're trying to primarily understand the character of Shogo Makishima here, we thought it would make sense to do a deep dive analysis of his character design. While Shogo Makishima's character design might not be particularly stand out in comparison with many villains from other anime series, that was a choice that is very much deliberate. While at a glance, Makishima might look just like any other young man in anime, there are certain details that begin to appear once you look a little closer. He's a tall, slender man with amber-colored eyes and silver hair that he holds back with a ponytail. His eyes, which sometimes appear pale gray, give off an aura that is calm but unsettling at the same time. While Makishima is an extremely shrewd man, his eyes sometimes betray his cold and calculating nature. Eagle-eyed fans have also noticed how sometimes his eyes appear vacant, perhaps to indicate his disillusionment with society. His silver hair gives him an ethereal and otherworldly appearance, which is symbolic of his detachment from society and the system that governs it. His pale skin tone further adds to this idea. His slender frame is often deceiving, as he is more athletic than he appears. While it does add an aristocratic air that complements his refined mannerisms, his body is physically agile and strong, as seen when he handily defeats Shinya Kogami. Even the clothes Shogo Makishima wears are laced heavily with symbolism. His choice of outfit is casual yet elegant, as he often wears long coats and turtlenecks. The color of his fits is subdued with neutral tones like beige, gray, and white. This air of minimalism is further enhanced by the lack of accessories or loud designs on his clothes. Makishima's body language barely betrays any strong emotions. He carries himself with a relaxed and confident poise even when discussing things like murder. If one were to sit back and think about it, Makishima's appearance is a foil to the rough and rugged Shinya Kogami's appearance. It's interesting how the author pushes their duality even through their individual appearance and fashion sense. While in the real world, dressing in eccentric outfits is sometimes considered an act of rebellion or trying to stand out from the crowd, in Makishima's case, it's quite the opposite. His overall appearance and his sense of dress are symbolic of him being in stark opposition to the futuristic, tech-heavy world of psychopaths, and it's perfect for someone who claims to reject the Sybil system. Evil hidden behind charisma, Griffith and Makishima. Having given you a brief insight into the character of Makishima, let's now move on to the main part of the video where we discuss the similarities between Griffith and Makishima. Griffith and Makishima are two of the most layered antagonists in all of anime and manga. While they have two distinct personalities, overall there are some very stark similarities between the two, starting with their godly charisma. Both Griffith and Makishima have a regal air about them. They're not ones for loud speeches and histrionics, but despite being relatively soft-spoken, they manage to bend people to their will. They're able to attract individuals who resonate with their respective ideologies. Makishima is an anarchist, rebel, and murderer, while in Griffith's case, it is those who would see their dreams fulfilled in the process of having his dream realized. Both of these individuals are able to manipulate others into doing their bidding and rushing to their deaths. Makishima is able to manipulate individuals to commit murder on his behalf, and in the process get taken down by the Sybil system, while Griffith is able to convince the Band of the Hawk to rush into battle, putting their lives on the line every single time. Both of these men are able to use their charisma to essentially hurl others to their deaths to further their own ideology. They inspire an emotion that is akin to devotion in those surrounding them, despite the often bloody nature of their acts. This transitions us nicely to our next point: the ideological extremism of Griffith and Makishima. What we mean by ideological extremism is to take the ideological and philosophical beliefs harbored by an individual to their most radical conclusion. This is a trait that's displayed by both Griffith and Makishima abundantly. They believe that their radical actions, including things like betrayal, manipulation, and violence, are justified so long as they are in adherence to or pursuit of their ideology. Makishima's core ideology is that the existence of free will is what determines the meaning of being human. However, instead of trying to bring about a change in a less fatalistic way, Makishima chooses to resort to mass murder to prove his point. He believes that by killing people in this manner, he will force society to confront the absurdity of a system that reduces human beings to mere numbers. He believes this violence and brutality that he perpetrates is the last genuine human expression left in this sterile world run by a machine. While he claims to be murdering people to save humanity, he shows a complete lack of apathy towards the suffering he causes the very people he claims to want to save. He's kind of a nihilist who believes that life without freedom isn't worth living, so if people don't wake up to this reality, it's better that they die. Moving on to Griffith, while their ideologies don't exactly match, the White Falcon harbors his own brand of ideological extremism. Griffith's ideology is that some people are just born to fulfill a grander destiny than the rest, and it's the fate of the others to exist as tools to be used in the realization of that destiny. His definition of a friend perfectly sums up this ideology of his. Griffith says that only a man who is capable of harboring his own dreams, along with the will to fight even the ones closest to him in pursuit of it, is worthy of being called his friend. This essentially told us that not even Casca and Guts, with whom he shared an intricate bond, were good enough to be his friends, as he considered them mere cogs in the machinery he had devised to realize his dreams. When this dream is shattered and all hopes for its realization are lost, Griffith finally hits rock bottom, activating the Behelit and setting into motion the events of the fifth eclipse. It's important to note that Griffith was tortured for an extremely long time in the Tower of Rebirth, but he never truly broke. It's only after his escape that he realizes that he's no longer the man he once was, and his dream truly shatters. What follows in the fifth eclipse is that he regains the resolve to pursue his dreams once more and truly leans into this notion of ideological extremism. He easily betrays and sacrifices the very people he once called comrades, believing that all of his heinous actions were justified in the pursuit of ideals. Griffith believes that morality is a hindrance, and those without a dream and the will to chase it aren't worthy to be left alive. Both of these characters view people as a means to an end in pursuit of their ideologies. These two characters warp the moral landscape around them, challenging the established notions of right and wrong. They represent cold, self-perceived rationality behind their beautiful masks. Active foils to the protagonists of their series. Although it's not always necessary for a villain to be a perfect foil for the protagonist of their series, Griffith and Shogo Makishima are both great examples of being just that. Here lies yet another similarity between these two villains, as they both reflect what Guts and Kogami could become if they were to abandon their humanity. First, let's highlight the ways in which Makishima is a foil to Kogami. Makishima's decision-making process can be described as cold and calculated, where he takes into account every possible outcome before executing his plan. In contrast, Shinya Kogami is much more impulsive and driven by intuition and emotion. The violence that he perpetrates is also, by this virtue, reactive in nature and driven by his sense of justice, whereas Makishima's brand of violence has a more strategic approach along with a symbolic tone. While both these characters are at odds with the Sibyl system which governs the world, one chooses to reject its legitimacy and resorts to extremism, while the other also rejects the system but seeks justice despite it. In the end, when Makishima eventually meets his demise at the hands of Kogami, it's outside the system, not within. This makes Kogami step outside and exist in a plane where Makishima dwelt, which is outside the system, but he doesn't transform into the former. Moving on to the characters from Berserk, where Griffith, despite seeming to pursue a dream and being symbolized as a falcon, is caged by his dream. While he believes that his goal is the loftiest there is and he's predestined to greatness, this predestination is something that will bind him, then proceed to break him and finally reincarnate him in its own image as Femto, a member of the God Hand. Femto is an instrument of causality orchestrating events and people towards inevitable despair. He's the embodiment of what it means to be chosen by the law of causality and represents the illusion of freedom that exists in this world. Despite his rebirth as the prophesized Falcon of Light and creating his own kingdom, one cannot help but feel the lingering hand of fate over every action he performs. The Griffith that once dreamed of a kingdom of his own is long gone, replaced by a darker manifestation of his negative emotions, having transcended humanity as Femto. We can conclude that Makishima and Griffith are not just mere obstacles that their respective protagonists have to overcome, but philosophical provocations to their very nature as well. They force Kogami and Guts to question the system and beliefs that have defined them, forcing them to display their conviction through action and not words. This results in the elevation of these works from mere action-driven narratives to deep meditation on what it truly means to be human in a world where everything is predetermined. Griffith and Makishima, transcendental beings in a deterministic world governed by a rigid system. Both the world of Psychopaths and Berserk are governed by systems and laws that restrict the free will of their denizens. The world of Berserk is governed by something called the law of causality. This esoteric force has determined the fate of every living being from even before they're born. Created by the idea of evil, which was born from the collective human consciousness to add reason and meaning to their suffering and pain, has taken on the role of determining destiny for all sentient beings of the world. Unlike Guts, who's the ultimate struggler, having defied his ordained destiny from the moment of his birth all the way up to the events of the fifth eclipse, Griffith gives in to the flow of causality and in the process becomes elevated by it into something more than human. As a member of the God Hand, he's told to do as thou wilt, basically freeing him from the yoke of causality. He pursues an alternate path to this freedom, though it remains to be seen just how much agency is really afforded to him in the end. In the meantime, though, after having transcended humanity and seemingly the limitations imposed upon mankind by causality, Griffith once more pursues his goal of one day having his own kingdom by raising the city of Falconia and recreating the Band of the Hawk. In this way, he exists both within and outside of the system, similar to Shogo Makishima. The world order of psychopaths is equally repressive, allowing little to no agency to the people under it. Every citizen is analyzed by an all-powerful AI called Sybil, which grants them a psychopass depending on their propensity for criminal activity. When their level of psychopass exceeds a certain threshold, the authorities are immediately alerted, allowing them to preemptively apprehend the potential criminal and prevent the crime from occurring. Aiding the officers in this duty are individuals called enforcers, who are essentially those whose psychopass has already exceeded the required threshold at some point or is dangerously close to reaching that point. They've been recruited by the system due to their special skills to help apprehend others of their kind. In a world where free will is limited and emotions are artificially tempered to meet the standards set by something that isn't even human, Shogo Makishima is an outlier in this world, as he's a criminally asymptomatic individual who goes undetected by this supposedly flawless system, no matter what heinous acts he commits. In essence, he's an entity that tops the ruling concept of the world, making him almost divine in nature. He operates outside the known boundaries of the laws set by the Sybil system, making him immune to judgment and condemnation. Both of these characters defy their respective systems and become transcendental beings that cannot be judged by the forces that govern the world. In Makishima's case, this transcendence is of an allegorical nature, while in Femto's case, it's much more literal. The impact that this has upon themselves and the world that they live in, however, is almost the same. Both the Sybil system and causality offer to assimilate the two individuals into their fold, and here lies perhaps the only difference between the two in this regard, as one rejects the offer while the other accepts it. In either case, these two characters transcend the limitations of their worlds, becoming entities that cannot be controlled or measured by the systems in place. Through their actions, they redefine the very structure of the world, from the metaphysical rules to the narrative of the story. Marvelous verdict! In the end, both Makishima and Griffith are undoubtedly two of anime and manga's most layered and complex antagonists. One of the many things that makes these two individuals intriguing is the fact they both represent ideologies taken to their furthest limits. They both transcend the general populace of their respective worlds and have a warped perception of being heroes out to save humanity from their destruction while subconsciously fulfilling their own narcissistic desires. They both transcend humanity. In Makishima's case, it's by rejecting Sybil's moral qualification, while in the case of Griffith, it's by transcending the limits of mortal ambition by becoming an agent of fate itself. These characters are definitely more enigmatic and charismatic than the protagonists of their respective shows, inspiring blind devotion towards themselves and ordinary people. In their wake, they leave behind broken protagonists and shattered societies, redefining the very concepts of justice and fate. The key difference lies in the fact that Makishima ultimately dies a human clinging to his belief of autonomy and agency, while Griffith abandons his humanity, becoming Femto, an agent of the preordained destiny. In the end, both these characters ask an important question regarding the value of a human soul in a world that venerates order and destiny. These two characters, although wildly similar, offer two distinct answers to this question, as one dies for freedom while the other kills for a dream. We hope that with this video, you were not just able to see the similarities between these two iconic antagonists, but also understand the character of Shogo Makishima even better. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out the rest of our channel, where we post daily videos featuring all your favorite anime and manga. For now, though, our time together is at an end. We hope to see you soon in the next one, but until then, stay safe and stay marvelous.